Hey guys, Deslater Magic here, and it's time for yet another video in my apparently popular series, even though it's only one day old. That's right, it's time for MTG Mistakes Part 3, and in this series, of course, I talk about all kinds of mistakes that people make, either gameplay mistakes, deck building mistakes, or, rules mistakes, strategy mistakes, mental mistakes, just anything that's making you a worse player. So we can focus on making you a better player all day, but like I always say, if you keep making mistakes, that's pretty much offsetting anything that you're doing to improve your gameplay. Now, unfortunately, this one I didn't want to make because I know a lot of people know how this works. If you've been playing for even a little bit of time, you probably know how this works. But for all the new players out there and, all the more casual people, I just had to make it. And it's the Trample rules. Trample is considered what they call an evergreen ability, which means it's going to be in practically every single set. They want to print it as much as possible. So it's up there with like Death Touch, Lifelink, and the typical stuff that you just see on creatures constantly. So you would think quite a few people know how it works, but unfortunately there's quite a few people who also don't know how it works. So let's start with the simplest of simple examples. You have a 5/5 Trampler and they try and block with a 2/2. Nothing special, no, Death Touch, Lifelink, protection, none of that. Just 5/5 Trample versus 2/2 blocker. So obviously, after their toughness is considered, which is 2, the additional 3 damage goes through to the player and hits the player. Now, in this simple situation, and in even more complicated blocking situations where there's a lot of other things to consider, the rule states that you only have to assign enough damage for it to be lethal to one or more blocking creatures, whoever's blocking it. Then all the rest of the damage is allowed to go past. So let's start with Double Strike and Trample. So we have a 5/5 Double Striker with Trample and a 2/2 blocker. Well, the first strike occurs, you deal 2 damage, kill it because that's lethal, and the additional 3 goes past because all damage is Trample, even first strike damage, and then the entire 5 goes past. So Double Strike just means you hit twice. I mean, really, you just follow along with what would normally happen. You perform combat damage twice during first strike phase and then, I guess, regular strike phase. Never did learn what that phase is called. It's actually more of a sub-phase, if I remember correctly. But who cares about terminology? Now, the part B of the rule, I guess, which is probably not literally part B in the rules, it states that you must deal lethal damage to all blocking creatures if you're being blocked multiple times against a Trampler. So let's say you got just a regular 5/5 Trampler, no Double Strike this time, and you're being blocked by a 2/2 and another 2/2. Well, you have to deal 2 damage to the first one, 2 damage to the second one, and then 1 damage to the player. You can't just say, oh, I'm gonna only attack 1 and let 3 go through instead of assigning it to the next one. No, you do have to kill off every single creature that's blocking, or at least whatever would normally be enough to kill them. So usually what their toughness is. So let's say that you have a 5/5 Trampler and they block with a 1/1 Indestructible. Well, you're going to swing against the Indestructible, and how much damage does it take to kill it? Well, unlimited, right? I mean, there is no limit. No amount of damage could kill it, so 100% of your damage has to be assigned to it, right? Wrong. You actually only have to assign 1 damage because normally 1 damage is what would, be enough to kill it. It just happens to have Indestructible. Now that's the one that a lot of people get wrong, and I believe it works the same way for protection from, we'll say, black. So if it's a giant black 5/5 Trampler, can't imagine what creature that would possibly be. Probably a flying demon. I don't know. I'm making this up as I go. If it's swinging against a 1/1 creature that has protection from black, normally you would only have to do 1 damage to kill off its toughness, to deal enough damage to kill it, and then the fact that it's not actually taking damage in the first place is ignored. So it would still be 4 trample damage going past it. Now, you probably got this by now, but let's say you have a 5/5 Trampler, and you have a 2/2 blocker, a 4/4 blocker, and another 2/2 blocker. So it's a 2/2, 2/2, 4/4 for 8 total toughness. Obviously, they're trying to triple block and kill your 5/5 because it's also 8 attack power. You still can't say, oh, I'm only gonna hit 1 and then the rest trample past. You can't do that. You have to effectively at least attempt to kill off everything in its way. But what you can do, and this is just regardless of Trample, this is just how it works, you can assign damage to the 2/2 first, then assign damage to the other 2/2 first, and then assign the remaining 1 damage to the 4/4, so at least you kill 2 of their creatures. Now, if you were to assign 2 damage to the 2/2 and then 3 damage to the 4/4, whoop-de-doo. I mean, it doesn't matter. There's no point because you're not going to kill it unless you needed to do 3 damage because you have a 1 damage spell or something. So like I said, no difference with Trample there other than any spare damage after you've attempted to kill off everything in your way rolls over to the player. But otherwise, you can choose to assign damage in any order you want, just the same as if it didn't have Trample. And people have tried to tell me, oh, it's the order that I blocked, because I selected this as blocker first, so you have to hit it first. No, it's the attacker who gets to choose how damage is allocated. It's not alphabetical order, it's not left to right, it's not... I mean, I've heard it all. No, you get to choose, trust me, that's what the rules say. Now here's the fun one. This is the one that not many people know. Like, they kind of know, but they're not sure about it, so let me just reinforce this in your head. I have a 5/5 Trampler, and it has Death Touch. And let's say I'm being blocked by 4 0/4s, just giant walls, so that's 16 total toughness. I have no idea why the opponent would block that way. Who cares? Maybe they're an idiot and they're afraid of a boost spell. Well, I've got bad news for you, idiot player. Since you have Death Touch, I believe the definition of Death Touch is stated as something like, any amount of damage done by this creature is considered enough to be lethal. Well, guess what? Mix that with Trample. So what you do is you take your 5/5 and you could legally allocate 1 damage to the first 0/4, 1 damage to the next 0/4, and so on. So you do 1 damage, 1 damage, 1 damage, 1 damage, and then the remaining 1 damage goes to the player. And everybody's going to say, no, that's not how it works. You have to get past all their toughness. No, you only have to do lethal damage. And since it's Death Touch, you can assign just 1 damage across the board to every single creature. And I've seen people lose enormous armies full of creatures because they don't know this rule. And then usually they ask me, and I'm like, yep, that's how the rule works. Bet you're not going to forget it now, though. Now, the last one I wanted to save because it's part of another video idea I have, but I just can't not mention it because it's huge. Trample is a combat-only ability. There's a specific name for like a non-combat ability and a combat ability. I don't remember what it is because I'm not done researching that other video, but if you have a card that says your creature, an opponent creature, fights, and you're doing it as a sorcerer during your first main phase, it's not even in the combat phase, does the trample damage go past? No, because it's a combat-only ability. It describes how combat damage is dealt during combat, during the combat phase. So you're not really attacking, which then an on-swing effect also doesn't go off, just for the record. They don't get on-block abilities. The creatures are literally just ramming into each other, and it's not really combat. So you're not trampling past, you're just fighting it. Now, there are other cards that instead of saying your creature fights their creature, it says your creature deals its power in damage to opponent creature. Still, trample is completely irrelevant there because it's literally saying, hey, your attack power is 5. Okay, deal 5 damage to the enemy creature. That's it. And there are 2 separate ways to phrase that spell. I'm not going to go way into it, but both of them don't result in you trampling past it. Hopefully that covers Trample extensively, but if you have any more Trample-related tips or rulings, feel free to leave them down in the comment section. Otherwise, hopefully now you're a Trample expert, so dust off those green cards and go start trampling past everybody with your giant creatures. And I'll see you guys next video.